The rain fell softly over Ashbourne Manor, turning the sprawling green fields into a silver-grey sea beneath the evening sky. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe stood at the tall drawing-room window, her hands clasped tightly before her. The estate had belonged to her husband's family for generations, and within weeks it would no longer belong to her. The realization settled heavily in her chest. 3 months had passed since Lord Henry Ashbourne's funeral. 3 months since she had stood beside a black marble grave while London society whispered their condolences and calculated her future, because everyone knew the truth. A young widow without a son was a vulnerable creature, a woman balanced upon the edge of ruin, especially when powerful men stood ready to claim what remained. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter." The butler stepped inside carrying a sealed letter. His expression appeared unusually tense. "A messenger arrived from London, my lady." Eleanor accepted the envelope. The seal immediately caught her attention. Dark blue wax, a crest, a lion standing beneath a crown. Her pulse quickened. There were only a handful of families in England who carried such a symbol, and only one who could command attention with a single letter. The Duke of Ravenshire. She stared at the seal. Why would a duke write to her? Their paths had crossed only twice, once at a winter ball, once at Parliament's charity banquet. Both meetings had lasted less than 5 minutes. Yet she remembered him clearly, because everyone remembered Sebastian Hawthorne. The Duke of Ravenshire was impossible to ignore. Tall, cold, dangerously handsome, the sort of man whose silence carried more weight than another man's speech. Rumours followed him everywhere. Some claimed he possessed immense influence over ministers. Others whispered he had turned down 3 marriage proposals from some of England's most eligible ladies. No one seemed to know what occupied his heart, or if he possessed one at all. Slowly, Eleanor broke the seal. Her eyes scanned the page, then widened. She read it again and again. The words refused to make sense. Finally, she lowered the paper. "What is it, my lady?" the butler asked. Eleanor looked up. "The Duke of Ravenshire wishes to visit Ashbourne Manor." The butler blinked. "Visit? Here? Tomorrow?" Silence filled the room. Neither understood why. The Duke had no connection to the estate. No connection to her family. No connection to her late husband. At least none she knew of. Yet the letter was unmistakable. He was coming. And he claimed the matter was urgent. Very urgent. The following afternoon arrived beneath clear skies. Servants rushed through the manor, preparing for the arrival. Fresh flowers decorated every room. Silver gleamed. Fireplaces burned warmly. Despite her efforts to remain calm, Eleanor found herself checking the front drive repeatedly. Shortly after noon, a carriage appeared. Black, elegant, bearing the ducal crest. The horses stopped before the entrance. A footman opened the door, and then he emerged. Sebastian Hawthorne, the Duke of Ravenshire. Even from a distance, he commanded attention. His dark coat fit perfectly. His posture was straight, his expression unreadable. Yet something about his eyes seemed troubled, as though he carried burdens invisible to everyone else. Eleanor descended the steps to greet him. "Your Grace." He bowed respectfully. "Lady Ashbourne," his voice was deep and composed. "I appreciate your willingness to receive me. You mentioned the matter was urgent." "It is." For a brief moment their eyes met. An unfamiliar tension passed between them. Then he glanced toward the house. "May we speak privately?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." Minutes later they sat across from one another in the library. The room smelled faintly of leather-bound books and cedarwood. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, yet despite the warmth an uneasy chill lingered. Sebastian removed a leather case from inside his coat. Carefully he placed it upon the table. "I came because of your husband." Eleanor stiffened. "My husband?" "Yes." His gaze remained fixed upon her. "There is something you were never told." A strange feeling twisted inside her. "What do you mean?" Sebastian opened the case. Inside rested a collection of aged documents. Some appeared decades old, others looked surprisingly recent. Then he withdrew one final paper, a sealed will. Eleanor's breath caught. "It cannot be." Sebastian's expression darkened. "It is." She stared at the document. Every legal proceeding regarding her husband's estate had already concluded. The courts had ruled. The property would pass to Henry's cousin, the ambitious Lord Edwin Blackwell, the man who had been pressuring her to vacate Ashbourne Manor before autumn, a man she neither trusted nor respected. Yet here sat another will, a hidden will, one no one had ever mentioned, one no solicitor had presented, one that should not exist. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. Sebastian leaned back slightly. "In my father's private archives." Her confusion deepened. "What connection could your father possibly have to my husband?" For the first time since arriving, uncertainty flickered across the Duke's face, as though he were deciding how much truth to reveal. Finally he answered, "A connection neither of us fully understood until recently." Eleanor felt her pulse pounding. Outside, the wind stirred the branches beyond the windows. Inside, silence stretched between them. Then Sebastian delivered the words that changed everything. "My father and your husband shared a secret." The room seemed to stop. And if this will is authentic, he continued quietly, then Ashbourne Manor does not belong to Lord Blackwell. Eleanor stared at him. It belongs to you. The world tilted beneath her. Not because of the inheritance, not because of the estate, but because she suddenly realized something far more dangerous. The Duke of Ravenshire had not travelled across England merely to deliver documents. He had come because this secret touched his family, his past, and perhaps even his future. A future that was becoming entangled with hers. Neither of them understood it yet, but the hidden will was only the beginning, because buried inside those papers was a truth powerful enough to shake London's highest circles. A truth someone was willing to kill to keep hidden, and at that very moment, miles away in London, Lord Edwin Blackwell received news of the Duke's arrival at Ashbourne Manor. His face turned pale, then furious, because he knew exactly what those documents contained, and he could not allow the widow or the Duke to uncover the rest, under any circumstances. The evening shadows lengthened across Ashbourne Manor. Unaware of the danger approaching, Eleanor and Sebastian continued examining the mysterious documents. Neither noticed the rider watching the estate from a distant hill. Neither saw him turn his horse and gallop toward London, carrying orders that would begin a war neither of them were prepared for. For several moments, neither Eleanor nor the Duke spoke. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed through the library, steady, relentless, as though time itself had paused to listen. Eleanor's gaze remained fixed upon the document resting between them. "It belongs to me," she finally whispered. Sebastian inclined his head. "If the will is genuine," she laughed softly. Not from amusement, from disbelief. "Your Grace, I have spent 3 months preparing to lose everything." Her voice trembled slightly. "The courts have already ruled. Lord Blackwell has already begun making arrangements. Solicitors have examined every record." "Not every record." His reply was quiet, certain. He slid the document toward her. "Read it." With careful fingers, Eleanor unfolded the pages. The handwriting was unmistakably Henry's. Her late husband's elegant script stretched across the parchment. She felt her chest tighten. For a brief moment it was as though he sat beside her again, writing letters at his desk, smiling over morning tea, speaking of future plans they would never share. Slowly she began reading. The first paragraphs appeared ordinary enough. Declarations of property, investments, family obligations. Then she reached the final section, and everything changed. Her eyes widened. "No." Sebastian watched her carefully. "What is it?" She looked up. "There is another beneficiary." His expression sharpened. "Who?" Eleanor swallowed, then read the name aloud. "Sebastian Hawthorne." Silence. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. The Duke stared at her. For the first time since arriving, genuine surprise crossed his face. "My name?" Eleanor nodded. "You inherited something as well." Sebastian rose from his chair, crossed the room, turned toward the window. For several moments he said nothing. Then, "That is impossible." "Apparently not. My father never mentioned any connection between our families. Neither did Henry." The Duke slowly turned, his eyes narrowed. "What exactly did he leave me?" Eleanor continued reading. Then she froze once more. The answer made even less sense than before. "A journal." Sebastian frowned. "A journal? Not just any journal." The voice dropped. "It says the journal contains proof regarding an agreement made 28 years ago." The Duke's expression darkened. "What agreement?" Eleanor scanned the page. The words seemed almost unbelievable. Then she read them aloud. "An agreement concerning the true inheritance of Ashbourne Manor and the future protection of the Hawthorne bloodline." The room fell silent. Neither understood, yet both immediately recognized the significance. The Hawthorne bloodline, the Duke's family, one of the oldest noble houses in England. What connection could Ashbourne Manor possibly have to them? And why would Henry hide such a secret? Sebastian returned to the table. His jaw tightened. "Where is the journal?" Eleanor continued reading, then pointed to a single sentence near the bottom. "The journal has been concealed where only the rightful heir shall discover it." The Duke muttered something under his breath. "That's all?" She nodded. "That's all." For the first time, frustration appeared on his face, a surprisingly human expression that made him seem younger, less intimidating, less like the untouchable Duke society imagined, and far more like a man facing a mystery he could not solve. Eleanor noticed it immediately, and strangely she found herself smiling. Sebastian looked at her. "What is amusing?" His eyebrow rose. "Me? You finally look confused." "I assure you, Lady Ashbourne, I am rarely confused. Then this must be a historic occasion." A reluctant smile touched his lips, brief, dangerous, gone almost instantly. Yet Eleanor felt something shift. The tension between them changed, not entirely, but enough. For the first time since his arrival they felt less like strangers, more like allies, two people trapped inside the same puzzle. Several hours later the sun had begun to set. Stacks of documents covered the library table, estate records, letters, property maps, financial ledgers. Yet no mention of the mysterious journal appeared anywhere. Eleanor rubbed her temples. "We are searching blindly." Perhaps. Sebastian studied an old map. But secrets rarely survive without leaving traces. A knock interrupted them. The butler entered. His expression looked uneasy. "My lady? What is it?" "A visitor has arrived." Eleanor frowned. "At this hour?" "Yes." The butler hesitated, then added, "Lord Blackwell." The room instantly grew cold. Sebastian slowly set down the map. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Lord Edwin Blackwell was not expected. Nor was he welcome. "What does he want?" she asked. "He insists on speaking with you immediately." Sebastian and Eleanor exchanged a glance. Neither needed to voice the obvious concern. Blackwell should not know about the Duke's visit, yet somehow he did. "Show him to the drawing room," Eleanor said. The butler bowed and departed. Sebastian rose. "I should leave." "No." He looked surprised. Eleanor stood. "If Blackwell is involved in this, then I would rather he know you are here." The Duke studied her, then nodded once. "As you wish." Together they walked toward the drawing room. The moment they entered, Lord Blackwell turned. His smile appeared polished, friendly, artificial. Everything about the man felt artificial, tall and handsome in the way expensive portraits were handsome. Yet his eyes lacked warmth, lacked honesty. And when he saw Sebastian standing beside Eleanor, the smile vanished only for an instant. But Eleanor noticed. So did the Duke. "Your Grace," Blackwell said carefully. "Lord Blackwell." The two men regarded one another, like duelists measuring distance, like predators assessing risk. Neither blinked first. Finally, Blackwell turned toward Eleanor. "I came to discuss the estate. At night? I feared delays." His gaze flickered briefly toward Sebastian, then back. "Particularly after learning you had received unexpected company." Eleanor's pulse quickened. How did he know? Blackwell stepped forward. "Lady Ashbourne, I believe it would be wise for you to begin preparations for your departure." The room fell silent. "I beg your pardon?" "The estate transfer will proceed shortly." His tone remained pleasant, almost gentle, which somehow made it more insulting. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Nothing has changed." Blackwell smiled. "Oh, I think quite a lot has changed." Then his eyes settled upon Sebastian, and the friendliness vanished completely. "I would simply hate for false hope to cause unnecessary disappointment." A warning, thinly disguised. Sebastian recognized it immediately. "So would I," the Duke replied. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another degree. For several seconds no one spoke, then Blackwell bowed, shallow, insincere. "I shall take my leave." He turned toward the door. But before exiting, he paused and looked directly at Eleanor. What a tragedy it would be if certain old family secrets were brought into public view. The statement struck like a knife. Then he left. The door closed. Silence followed. Eleanor stared after him. What did he mean by that? Sebastian's expression was grim. "He knows." "Knows what?" The Duke looked toward the hidden will resting inside the leather case, then toward the darkening windows. "I don't know." His voice lowered. "But whatever secret Henry buried inside that journal." He paused. "And whatever connection exists between our families." His gaze hardened. "Lord Blackwell is terrified we will find it." Outside, thunder rolled across the distant horizon. A storm was approaching. And somewhere beyond Ashbourne Manor, Lord Blackwell rode into the darkness, carrying plans far more dangerous than either Eleanor or Sebastian could imagine. Because he had already sent men searching for the journal. And unlike the Duke and the widow, they were not searching to uncover the truth. They were searching to destroy it. Far beneath Ashbourne Manor, hidden behind a sealed stone wall forgotten for decades, a leather-bound journal waited in darkness, waiting, silent, holding secrets powerful enough to alter inheritances, destroy reputations, and reveal a connection between Eleanor Ashbourne and Sebastian Hawthorne that neither of them could possibly suspect. The storm arrived shortly after midnight. Rain lashed against the manor windows, wind howled through the ancient trees surrounding the estate, and sleep refused to come. Eleanor sat upright in bed, staring into darkness. Lord Blackwell's warning replayed endlessly in her thoughts. What a tragedy it would be if certain old family secrets were brought into public view. The words had not sounded like concern, they had sounded like a threat. Something about them unsettled her deeply. Finally, unable to endure another moment of restless thinking, she rose from bed and lit a candle. The manor was silent. Most servants had long since retired. Only the distant rumble of thunder disturbed the stillness. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, Eleanor stepped into the corridor. She intended to visit the library. Perhaps another examination of Henry's papers would reveal something overlooked. But as she descended the staircase, she noticed a faint glow beneath the library door. Someone was already awake. She approached quietly. The door stood slightly open. Inside, Sebastian sat alone at the large oak table. Several candles illuminated the room. Documents surrounded him. Maps, letters, estate records. His sleeves were rolled up. His coat discarded nearby. For the first time, he looked less like a duke and more like a man consumed by determination. Eleanor hesitated, then pushed the door open. Sebastian glanced up. Unable to sleep, she smiled faintly. "You as well?" Apparently, his eyes returned to a yellowed map. I believe I found something that instantly captured her attention. Eleanor crossed the room. What is it? Sebastian pointed toward a faded section of parchment. Look carefully. She leaned closer. The map appeared to show the original construction plans for Ashbourne Manor nearly 100 years earlier. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then she noticed it. A corridor. A narrow passage marked beneath the east wing. One that no longer appeared on modern maps. Her pulse quickened. That shouldn't be there. Exactly. Sebastian tapped the parchment. According to this, there was once an underground passage connecting the manor to an older section of the estate. Eleanor frowned. I've lived here for 7 years, I know. There is no underground passage. Then why did someone erase it? The question lingered. Neither possessed an answer. Yet both felt the same instinctive certainty. The journal, the hidden will, the mysterious agreement, everything seemed connected. Slowly, deliberately. Like pieces of a puzzle finally beginning to align. We should investigate, Sebastian looked at her. Now, why not? A flash of lightning illuminated the windows. Thunder followed immediately after. The Duke raised an eyebrow. Most ladies would choose daylight. Most ladies are not about to lose their estate. For a brief moment amusement touched his expression. Then he stood. Very well. An hour later they found themselves standing inside the oldest section of Ashbourne Manor. The east wing had remained largely unused for years. Dust-covered furniture. Portraits stared from shadowed walls. Ancient grandfather clocks stood frozen in time. The atmosphere felt strangely abandoned, as though the house itself had forgotten this place existed. Sebastian carried a lantern. Eleanor held a candle. Together they followed the map. Eventually they reached an isolated corridor lined with faded paintings. At the far end stood a portrait Eleanor had seen many times before, an ancestor, Lord Thomas Ashbourne, the first owner of the estate. Something about the painting suddenly caught Sebastian's attention. He stepped closer, examining the frame, then the wall, then the floor beneath it. What is it? Instead of answering, he pressed his hand against the carved wooden frame. A click echoed softly. Eleanor gasped. The portrait shifted. Slowly, silently, revealing darkness behind it. For several moments neither moved. Then Sebastian lifted the lantern. A narrow stone staircase descended into the earth, the hidden passage. Real, after all these years. Eleanor stared. I don't believe it. Neither do I. Yet there it was, waiting. The secret Henry had concealed. The secret Lord Blackwell feared. The secret connected to the Duke of Ravenshire. Somewhere below. Hidden in darkness. Eleanor met Sebastian's gaze. Shall we? His expression hardened. Together they descended. The air grew colder with every step. Stone walls surrounded them. The staircase seemed endless. At last it opened into a narrow underground corridor. The passage appeared ancient, older than the manor itself. Moisture dripped from the ceiling. Dust covered the floor. No one had walked here in years, perhaps decades. Sebastian held the lantern higher. Their shadows stretched across the walls. Neither spoke. The silence felt sacred. Dangerous, like entering a tomb. Then Eleanor noticed something. Footprints. Fresh footprints. She stopped. Sebastian. The Duke immediately turned. What is it? She pointed. His eyes narrowed. The marks were unmistakable. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. The realization sent a chill through both of them. They were not the first to discover the passage. Lord Blackwell's men. The possibility seemed obvious. Sebastian's jaw tightened. We may not have much time. They continued deeper. The corridor twisted, turned, then widened into a circular chamber hidden beneath the manor. Eleanor's breath caught. Shelves lined the walls, boxes, old ledgers, locked chests, decades of forgotten history. And at the center of the room stood a stone pedestal. Upon it rested a single leather-bound journal. The journal, for a moment neither moved. After everything, the search, the mystery, the threats, there it was, waiting, almost as though someone had known they would eventually arrive. Eleanor stepped forward, carefully. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the journal. The leather felt worn with age. The cover bore no title, no name, only a symbol, a lion beneath a crown, the hawthorn crest. Sebastian stared. My family's crest. Eleanor slowly opened the journal. The first page contained a handwritten note. The ink had faded but remained readable. She read aloud. To the rightful heirs of this secret. Both exchanged a glance. Then she continued. If you are reading this, then the deception can no longer remain buried. The chamber seemed to grow colder. The child taken from Ravenshire 28 years ago still lives. Sebastian froze. Eleanor stopped reading. The words echoed through the room. The child taken from Ravenshire still lives. Neither understood, yet both instantly recognized the magnitude. This was not merely an inheritance dispute. This was a family scandal, a noble scandal, potentially one capable of shaking England's aristocracy. Eleanor turned the page, and what she saw next made her blood run cold. A birth record, 2 names, one familiar, one impossible. She stared, unable to breathe, unable to speak. Sebastian noticed immediately. Eleanor. Her eyes lifted, slowly filled with disbelief. Sebastian, his voice hardened. What is it? She swallowed, then whispered, I think this journal says that someone lied about your family's heir. Before he could respond, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. Both spun around. The entrance door had slammed shut. Heavy footsteps approached from the darkness beyond. Several men, not one, not two, many, and a familiar voice called out from the shadows, smooth, cold, victorious. Thank you for finding the journal for me. Lord Blackwell stepped into the lantern light. A pistol gleamed in his hand. Behind him stood 6 armed men. His smile widened. Now I won't have to search for it myself. The rain had not ceased for 3 days. It drummed endlessly against the tall windows of Ashcombe Manor, turning the gardens into seas of silver and shadow. Lady Eleanor Harrow stood in the library, staring at the letter in her hand. The Duke's words still echoed in her thoughts. There is more in your late husband's will than anyone yet understands. More. What could possibly be more dangerous than what had already been revealed? The estate had nearly been stolen. Enemies surrounded her. Society whispered behind every fan and every closed drawing-room door. And now Nathaniel Ashford, Duke of Blackthorn, was hinting at another secret. A secret powerful enough to make Lord Whitmore panic. Eleanor folded the letter carefully. She had spent the last week trying to convince herself that the Duke's concern was merely practical, that he was helping because he respected the memory of her father, because he believed in justice, because he happened to be honourable, nothing more. But every time he entered a room, her heart betrayed her, and that frightened her more than any legal battle. A knock sounded. Before she could answer, the door opened. Nathaniel stepped inside. His dark coat was damp from the weather. Raindrops glistened in his hair. For a brief moment, he looked less like a duke and more like a man who had ridden through a storm simply because he could not stay away. The realization unsettled her. His gaze found hers immediately. It always did. I apologize for arriving unannounced. You never seem particularly troubled by that habit. A smile touched his lips. No. The warmth in his eyes made her pulse quicken. I suppose I am not. Silence stretched between them. Dangerous silence. The kind that felt too aware, too intimate. Nathaniel finally reached inside his coat and removed a bundle of documents. We have a problem. Eleanor's stomach tightened. What sort of problem? The kind that may place you in considerable danger. Her grip tightened around the chair beside her. Explain. He placed the papers upon the desk. I visited London. I assumed as much. I also visited your husband's former solicitor. The room suddenly felt colder. And? Nathaniel's expression darkened. There was a second document. Eleanor stared. A second will? No. His voice lowered. Something far more significant. He unfolded a yellowed sheet. The original ownership records of the Harrow lands. Confusion flickered across her face. I do not understand. Neither did I at first. He pointed towards several signatures. Then he spoke carefully. Your father never truly sold the northern estates. Eleanor blinked. The words made no sense. That is impossible. It is inconvenient. His eyes met hers. But not impossible. She stepped closer. The old paper trembled slightly in her hands. As she examined it, her breathing slowed, then stopped. The signature, the seal, the dates. Everything appeared genuine. What does this mean? Nathaniel's jaw hardened. It means Lord Whitmore has spent years attempting to claim land that legally belongs to you. The room seemed to tilt. Years. All this time. Every threat, every pressure campaign, every demand built upon a lie, a very deliberate lie. Why would he risk such a thing? Nathaniel's gaze sharpened. Because of what lies beneath those lands. Eleanor looked up. His expression alone told her she would not like the answer. What lies beneath them? Coal. The word landed heavily. Coal meant wealth. Industrial wealth. The kind capable of creating fortunes. The kind capable of destroying lives. The kind men killed for. Understanding dawned instantly. Lord Whitmore had never wanted Ashcombe Manor itself. He wanted the northern holdings, the mines, the future profits, the power, and he had been willing to ruin a widow to obtain them. A chill moved down Eleanor's spine. Dear God. Nathaniel nodded. Exactly. For several moments neither spoke. The implications were staggering. Then another realization appeared. A worse one. If Whitmore discovers you found these documents. Nathaniel smiled faintly. He already knows. Her heart dropped. What? He had me followed from London. The colour drained from her face. Nathaniel, I expected it. You should not sound so calm. I rarely sound anything else. Despite the seriousness of the situation, frustration flashed through her. You are impossible. His smile widened. That has been mentioned. She should not have laughed. Not now. Yet she did. And for one brief moment the tension eased. Then reality returned. What happens next? Nathaniel became serious again. We move carefully. Meaning, we gather evidence. We expose him. Eventually, his voice lowered. But first we survive long enough to do so. The statement hung heavily between them. Survive, not succeed, not win. Survive. Eleanor suddenly understood how dangerous this truly was. Whitmore was not merely ambitious, he was desperate, and desperate men often became reckless. Nathaniel seemed to read her thoughts. He will strike again. She swallowed. You sound certain. I am. How? His eyes grew distant. Because men like Whitmore always do. A shadow crossed his face, one she had noticed before but never understood. Pain, old experience, something from his past, something he never discussed. Eleanor studied him carefully. You have seen this before. Nathaniel said nothing. That silence was answer enough. For the first time she realized how little she truly knew about the man who had become her greatest ally. Society knew the title, the fortune, the reputation, but not the scars, not the battles, not the sacrifices, not whatever haunted his eyes whenever the conversation turned to betrayal. At last he spoke. My father trusted the wrong people. The words came quietly. He paid dearly for it. Eleanor waited, but Nathaniel offered nothing more. The door closed once again around that part of his life. She did not push, yet. Instead, she asked softly, "And what did you learn from that?" His gaze met hers. A storm seemed to move beneath the surface. That trust is the most dangerous gift one person can offer another. The answer struck her unexpectedly, because it sounded less like wisdom and more like a wound. For a moment, neither looked away. The atmosphere shifted. Something invisible passed between them, something neither could easily name. Then footsteps echoed from the corridor. The spell broke instantly. A servant appeared at the doorway. Your Grace, Nathaniel turned. What is it? The servant looked nervous, very nervous. A messenger has arrived. From whom? The young man swallowed. Lord Whitmore, sir. The room went still. Nathaniel's expression hardened immediately. The servant extended a sealed envelope. The wax bore Whitmore's crest, a challenge wrapped in politeness. Nothing more dangerous existed in English society. Nathaniel broke the seal. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Then his jaw tightened. Eleanor felt dread growing. What does it say? For several seconds he remained silent. Finally, she read, and her blood ran cold. Lady Eleanor Harrow. I believe misunderstandings have clouded recent events. Perhaps it is time we settled our differences privately. I invite you to attend a gathering at Whitmore Hall next. Friday evening. Certain matters regarding your late husband's affairs may interest you greatly. I assure you the truth will finally come to light. Lord Whitmore. Eleanor looked up. He knows. Nathaniel nodded. Yes, he knows we found something, yes. Fear and anger twisted together inside her. It is a trap without question. She set the letter down. Then we do not go. Nathaniel's gaze remained fixed on the paper. For the first time since entering the room, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. No, he said quietly. We absolutely must go. Eleanor stared at him. Outside, thunder rolled across the countryside, and somewhere beyond the storm, Lord Whitmore was waiting for them to step directly into his game. And neither Eleanor nor the Duke yet realized that Whitmore possessed a secret far more dangerous than the one hidden inside the will. A secret capable of destroying not only Ashcombe Manor, but the future Nathaniel and Eleanor were beginning, despite every effort to imagine together. The rain arrived before dawn. It swept across the hills of Ashcombe like a grey curtain, drumming against the windows of the manor and turning the gardens into shimmering pools of silver. Lady Eleanor Harcourt stood in the library alone. The will lay open before her. Beside it rested a collection of letters that she and the Duke had spent the previous evening examining. Letters written decades ago. Letters that should never have existed, and yet they did. Proof that someone had deliberately hidden Lord Harcourt's true intentions. Proof that powerful people had benefited from his disappearance. Proof that the struggle for Ashcombe was far larger than a simple inheritance dispute. Eleanor stared into the fireplace. For weeks she had believed she was fighting for land. Now she understood she was fighting for truth, and truth had enemies. The library door opened. She did not need to look up. She recognized the Duke's footsteps immediately. Steady, confident, unhurried, the kind of footsteps belonging to a man who never needed to announce himself. Have you slept? He asked. Poorly. Then we are alike. She finally looked toward him. Even in simple riding clothes he seemed impossibly composed. Dark coat, rain on his shoulders, a seriousness in his eyes that had only deepened since discovering the letters. The solicitor replied this morning, he said. Her pulse quickened. And he confirmed something interesting. Eleanor straightened. The signatures. What about them? They are authentic. Silence filled the room. Her stomach tightened. If the signatures are genuine, then Lord Harcourt truly altered his will shortly before his disappearance. The realization struck her like lightning. Someone had not forged the document. Someone had buried it. Someone powerful. Someone with enough influence to suppress the truth for years. The Duke crossed the room. There is more. Her expression hardened. There always is. A faint smile touched his lips. Unfortunately, he placed another letter on the desk. This arrived before sunrise. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The message brief. Too brief. Lady Harcourt, withdraw your claim immediately. Some truths were buried for a reason. Leave Ashcombe, or suffer the consequences. No signature, no seal, no name. Only a threat. Ella's fingers tightened around the paper. The Duke watched her carefully. Are you frightened? She met his gaze. Should I be? Yes. The honesty surprised her. Most men would have offered false reassurance. The Duke never did. He respected reality too much. You believe they are serious? I know they are. The room grew very quiet. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. For the first time, Eleanor truly understood the danger surrounding her. This was no longer a dispute among noble families. Someone was desperate. Desperate people became reckless, and reckless people became dangerous. Yet strangely, fear was not what she felt. That was closer. Years of uncertainty. Years of watching others profit from what should have belonged to her husband. Years of silence. And now someone expected her to retreat? No, she was tired of retreating. I will not leave, the Duke studied her. I suspected as much. They threatened me because they are afraid. Perhaps. They would not act if the truth meant nothing. A hint of approval appeared in his expression. That conclusion is correct. Eleanor folded the letter carefully. Then she placed it beside the will. They made a mistake. The Duke raised an eyebrow. How so? They reminded me why this matters. For several moments neither spoke. Then unexpectedly the Duke laughed softly. Not mockingly, admiringly. And Eleanor realized something. He was proud of her. The thought sent warmth through her chest. A dangerous warmth. One she had spent weeks trying to ignore. One becoming increasingly difficult to deny. Because somewhere along this journey, she had stopped seeing him merely as an ally. And that realization terrified her more than any anonymous threat. Later that afternoon, the Duke requested a private meeting, not in the library, not in his study, but in the old conservatory overlooking the eastern gardens. The choice puzzled Eleanor, until she arrived. The room was empty except for him. Rain tapped gently against the glass ceiling. Flowers climbed the walls. The entire space felt hidden from the world, private, intimate, dangerously intimate. The Duke stood beside a marble fountain. When she entered, his expression became unusually serious. Not political seriousness, not legal seriousness, something else, something personal. Eleanor. The sound of her name on his lips made her heart stumble. You wished to speak with me? I did. He paused. For perhaps the first time since they had met, he appeared uncertain. The sight startled her. The Duke of Ravenshire was never uncertain. Yet now he seemed to be choosing his words carefully, as though one wrong sentence might change everything. Finally he spoke. The situation is becoming more dangerous. No, you may soon become a target. Her gaze softened. I suspected that as well. He nodded, then took a breath. There is a solution. Eleanor waited, but suddenly she wasn't sure she wanted to hear it, because instinct told her this conversation was about more than safety, more than legal strategy, more than Ashcombe. The Duke looked directly into her eyes. If the threats continue, his voice lowered, I want you to marry me. The world stopped. The rain disappeared. The fountain vanished. Everything vanished except those words. I want you to marry me. Eleanor stared at him, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to understand whether she had imagined it. The Duke remained perfectly still, waiting, giving her space, giving her respect. Yet the intensity in his eyes revealed the truth. This was no impulsive statement. He had thought about it, carefully, deliberately, for a very long time. Eleanor, her pulse thundered. This would not be charity, silence, nor obligation. More silence, his expression softened. It would be because I cannot imagine a future in which you are absent from it. Her heart shattered and reassembled in the same instant. For weeks she had tried to deny what was happening between them, tried to dismiss every glance, every conversation, every moment of understanding, every spark. But now denial had become impossible, because the Duke was no longer speaking as her protector. He was speaking as a man in love. And the terrifying truth was that she loved him too. Yet before she could answer, a crash exploded somewhere outside. Both turned instantly. Another crash followed. Then shouting. The Duke's expression changed immediately, from tenderness to alarm. He moved toward the doors. Eleanor, stay here. What happened? I don't know. The shouting grew louder. A servant suddenly burst into the conservatory, breathless, terrified. My lord. The Duke stepped forward. What is it? The servant swallowed hard. Horsemen. Silence. How many? At least 6. Eleanor felt cold. The servant continued. They forced their way through the southern gate. The Duke's jaw tightened, and the man's face turned pale. They are heading toward the manor. The rain battered the glass overhead. Thunder shook the sky, and Eleanor realized the war for Ashcombe had finally arrived at their doorstep. The storm swallowed the evening. Lightning tore across the sky above Ashcombe Manor, illuminating the rain-soaked grounds in violent flashes of white. Inside the conservatory, silence lingered for only a moment after the servant's warning. Then everything erupted into motion. The Duke's expression became cold and controlled. The softness that had appeared when he confessed his feelings vanished instantly, not because his feelings had changed, because danger demanded something else. Action. Lock every entrance, he ordered. The servant hurried away. The Duke turned toward Eleanor. You must go to the east wing. No. His eyes narrowed. Eleanor, I am not hiding while others risk themselves. This is not a debate. It is if my life is involved. For a brief moment neither moved. Rain hammered the glass overhead. Thunder rolled across the estate. Finally the Duke exhaled. Part frustration, part admiration. You are impossible. I have heard that before. A ghost of a smile appeared, then disappeared. Stay close to me. The words were simple, yet something about them felt deeper than protection, almost like a promise. Eleanor nodded. Together they left the conservatory. The manor had transformed. Servants hurried through corridors carrying lanterns. Footmen secured shutters. Stable hands rushed indoors. Every face carried the same expression. Fear, not panic. Fear, the kind that comes when a threat becomes real. At the front entrance, several household guards gathered with muskets and pistols. The Duke moved among them calmly, speaking quietly. Giving instructions, his composure steadied everyone around him. Eleanor noticed something then. Leadership was not loud, not dramatic. The Duke never raised his voice, never demanded attention. Yet every person listened, every person trusted him. That was real authority, the kind built through character rather than power. A guard hurried forward. My lord, what is it? We found tracks. How close? The guard swallowed. They reached the southern orchard. The Duke's jaw tightened. They know the estate. The statement chilled Eleanor, because it meant this was not random. Someone had planned this. Someone familiar with Ashcombe. Someone who knew exactly where to strike. Another flash of lightning illuminated the windows. Then a gunshot echoed across the grounds. Several servants screamed. The guards immediately raised their weapons. Eleanor's pulse exploded. The Duke stepped forward. Position. A second gunshot followed. Closer, much closer, and then came shouting. Voices outside. Male voices, angry voices. The attack had begun. The next hour felt endless. Chaos. Messages arrived constantly. A broken gate. Movement near the stables. Unknown riders crossing the fields. Yet strangely, no direct assault came. Not immediately. Instead, the attackers seemed to be testing defences. Searching. Waiting. The Duke stood in the entrance hall studying reports. Eleanor remained beside him. She could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. He was piecing together a puzzle, and whatever answer he found clearly disturbed him. Finally she asked, "What are you thinking?" The Duke looked toward the windows. "They aren't here to kill." The words surprised her. What? If they wanted blood, they would have attacked already. Another shout echoed outside, he continued. "They want something." "The will, I believe so." A chill ran through her. Of course, the will, the document threatening to expose years of deception, the document capable of destroying powerful reputations. Someone wanted it destroyed, immediately. The Duke's gaze sharpened. Where is it now? The library safe. Good. He turned toward a guard. Double the protection around the west corridor. The man hurried away. For a moment Eleanor felt relief. The will was secure, protected, safe. Then another servant burst through the doors, pale as death. "My lord!" The Duke faced him instantly. What happened? The library. Every muscle in Eleanor's body tightened. The library what? The servant struggled to breathe. The window has been broken. Silence. The Duke moved immediately. "Eleanor, stay here." She ignored him and followed anyway. The library corridor was crowded with guards. Broken glass covered the floor. Rain blew through shattered windows. Books lay scattered everywhere. The room looked as though a hurricane had passed through it. The Duke entered first. His eyes swept across every detail. Then his expression darkened. The safe. It stood open, empty. Eleanor's heart stopped. No. The word escaped as a whisper. No, no, no. The will was gone. The letters were gone. Everything gone. One of the guards cursed under his breath. They were inside only minutes. The Duke remained silent, dangerously silent, the kind of silence that comes before terrible conclusions. Eleanor stepped forward. They took it. Yes. The Duke knelt beside the safe, examining scratches near the lock. Then something caught his attention. A folded piece of paper, hidden beneath the desk. He picked it up. Read it. His face hardened instantly. What does it say? He hesitated, then handed it to her. The message contained only one sentence. You should have left when we warned you. Eleanor felt ice spread through her chest. The threat was no longer abstract. It was personal, deliberate, and whoever stood behind it was becoming increasingly bold. The Duke folded the note, slowly, carefully. Too carefully. The gesture worried her more than anger would have, because he looked calm. Very calm, and calm men were often the most dangerous. Eleanor. His voice had changed. What is it? I know who did this. Shock filled the room. The guards exchanged glances. Eleanor stared at him. You do? The Duke nodded. Not the riders. The person behind them. Her pulse raced. Who? Another roll of thunder shook the manor. The Duke looked toward the darkness beyond the broken window, toward the distant hills, toward a truth neither of them had expected. Finally he spoke. The Earl of Blackthorn. Silence. The name hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Blackthorn. One of the most respected noblemen in the county, a family friend of her late husband, a man welcomed into Ashcombe countless times. Impossible. Yet suddenly pieces began fitting together. Too many pieces. His opposition, his interference, his suspicious interest in the estate, the missing years, the buried documents, everything. The Duke's eyes remained fixed on the storm. He has been manipulating this inheritance from the beginning. Eleanor struggled to breathe. Why? The Duke turned toward her, his expression grim. Because I believe your husband discovered something about him. The room became deathly quiet. What kind of something? The Duke hesitated, then answered. The kind worth killing for. Lightning exploded across the sky, and in that blinding flash Eleanor understood. This had never been about property, never been about money, never been about inheritance. It was about a secret hidden for years, a secret someone had been willing to protect at any cost, even murder. And somewhere beyond the storm, the man responsible now possessed the will. The storm continued through the night. Wind rattled the windows of Ashcombe Manor while servants moved through the corridors in fearful silence. But for Eleanor, the storm outside no longer mattered. A different storm had begun, one centred around a single name. Blackthorne, the Earl of Blackthorne, a man she had known for years, a man her husband had trusted, a man who had attended dinners at Ashcombe, shared conversations by the fireplace, raised glasses in celebration, and now the Duke was suggesting that same man might have been connected to Lord Harcourt's disappearance. It felt impossible, yet the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. The stolen will, the threats, the hidden letters, the years of interference. Every road seemed to lead back to him. Eleanor sat in the library while workers repaired the shattered windows. The Duke stood nearby examining documents. Neither had spoken for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. If you are right, the Duke looked up, then Blackthorne has been lying for years. Longer than that, she swallowed. You think he killed my husband? The words felt unreal. The Duke did not answer immediately. I think your husband learned something dangerous. About Blackthorne? Yes, and then disappeared. The Duke closed the document in his hands. That is what the evidence suggests. Eleanor looked away. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder, more suffocating, because she remembered something she had not thought about in years. A conversation, brief, strange. At the time it had seemed meaningless, now it felt important, very important. She stood abruptly. The Duke noticed immediately. What is it? Eleanor's heart raced. The night before he disappeared. The Duke's expression sharpened. What about it? My husband. She struggled to remember. He said something. What? He told me there were people who looked respectable in daylight but became monsters in darkness. The Duke remained silent. He seemed troubled. Her voice grew quieter. I asked him what was wrong, and he said he was close to uncovering something. The Duke stepped forward. What exactly did he say? Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to pull the memory from years of grief. Then suddenly she remembered every word perfectly. Her eyes opened. He said, she whispered, some fortunes are built on theft. Some titles are built on blood. Silence filled the room. The Duke's face hardened, because both of them understood what those words implied. Lord Harcourt had discovered a crime, not a small crime, a crime large enough to threaten noble families, a crime someone would kill to protect. Later that afternoon the Duke left Ashcombe, against Eleanor's wishes, against his own instincts, but there was no choice. If Blackthorne truly possessed the stolen will, time was running out. By nightfall the Duke arrived at Ravenshire House, his ancestral estate, fortress of stone and history. There he entered a private archive rarely opened by anyone. Dust-covered records lined the shelves, documents stretching back generations, land transactions, political correspondence, financial ledgers, the hidden history of powerful families, including Blackthorne's. For hours he searched, page after page, year after year. Most revealed nothing. Then, shortly before midnight, he found it, a ledger, old, worn, forgotten. Yet the moment he opened it, he knew, his pulse quickened, because the numbers did not match. Entire properties had changed ownership decades ago. Large sums had vanished. Land had been transferred illegally through shell agreements. The transactions all pointed toward one conclusion. The Blackthorne fortune was built on fraud, massive fraud, generations of it. The Earl's wealth, his power, his influence, much of it had been stolen. The Duke stared at the evidence, then discovered something even worse. A name. One name repeated throughout the documents. A witness. A man who had uncovered the scheme years earlier. A man who had threatened exposure. A man who later vanished, without explanation. The Duke felt cold, because he recognized the name. It was the same investigator Lord Harcourt had been meeting before his disappearance. The same investigator who was never seen again. Two men, both searching for truth, both vanished. The pattern was undeniable now. Blackthorne was not merely corrupt, he was dangerous. The following evening the Duke returned to Ashcombe. He arrived after sunset, exhausted, determined, and carrying evidence that could destroy an empire of lies. Eleanor met him in the entrance hall. The moment she saw his face, she knew. Something had changed. You found something. The Duke nodded. Yes. How bad is it? For a moment he said nothing. Then he handed her the ledger. She opened it slowly, read several entries, then several more. Her face paled. My God, the Duke's voice was low. The Blackthorn fortune was never legitimate. Eleanor looked up. He stole everything, not personally, but his family did, and he continued benefiting from it. The realization was staggering. An entire noble dynasty built on theft, decades of deception, decades of lies. But there was still one question, the most important question. If this is true, Eleanor swallowed. What happened to my husband? The Duke's jaw tightened. I do not know, yet. The word hung in the air, yet, because now they were closer than ever before. Closer to answers, closer to justice, closer to danger. And that danger was already moving toward them. Neither knew that at that very moment, miles away in Blackthorn Manor, the Earl sat alone in his study. The stolen will burned inside the fireplace, its ashes drifting upward into darkness. The evidence was gone, destroyed, or so he believed. The Earl watched the flames quietly, then opened a drawer. Inside rested a small leather journal. Lord Harcourt's journal. The journal no one knew existed. The journal containing the final truth. The truth about Blackthorn. The truth about the missing investigator. And the truth about what really happened on the night Lord Harcourt disappeared. The Earl's hands trembled slightly. Not from guilt, from fear. Because for the first time in years he realized something. The Duke was getting close. Far too close. And if the journal ever fell into the wrong hands, everything would collapse. His title, his fortune, his reputation, his future, everything. The Earl stared into the fire, then made a decision, a terrible decision, a desperate decision. The kind made only by men who can see their downfall approaching. By sunrise someone would die, and this time, the target would not be Lord Harcourt. It would be the Duke of Ravenshire. The fog arrived before dawn. It crept across the countryside like a living thing, silent, cold, merciless. The hills surrounding Ashcombe disappeared beneath a blanket of grey, and even the ancient oak trees seemed like shadows drifting through a dream. Inside Ashcombe Manor, Eleanor stood by her bedroom window, unable to sleep. Something felt wrong. Ever since the Duke's return, an unease had settled over her. Not fear, instinct. The same instinct that had warned her years ago that something was wrong with her husband's disappearance. The same instinct now whispered that danger was moving closer. She watched the fog consume the gardens, then a knock came at her door. It was Thomas, the Duke's trusted valet. His face looked unusually pale. My lady. The Duke left before sunrise. Eleanor frowned. Where? He did not say. Her stomach tightened. He left alone, only with 2 riders. The feeling worsened. Because the Duke never acted carelessly. Never. If he had left secretly, it meant something urgent demanded his attention. Something important. Or something dangerous. 3 hours earlier, the Duke of Ravenshire rode through the fog-covered countryside. His horse moved steadily along a narrow road leading toward an abandoned chapel several miles from Ashcombe. A meeting had been arranged, a confidential meeting. The message had arrived shortly after midnight. No signature, no seal, only information. Information that could reveal what truly happened to Lord Harcourt. Under normal circumstances, the Duke would have ignored it. But the details contained within the letter were too specific, too accurate. Someone knew something. Someone was finally willing to talk. And if that person truly possessed answers, the risk was worth taking. The fog thickened. One of the riders beside him shifted uneasily. My lord, the Duke glanced toward him. Yes, this doesn't feel right. No, the Duke's eyes scanned the road ahead. It doesn't. The rider hesitated. Should we turn back? The Duke shook his head. Not yet, because despite his suspicions, he couldn't ignore the possibility. If this meeting was genuine, it might finally expose Blackthorn, might finally bring justice, might finally reveal Lord Harcourt's fate, and some risks were worth taking. The abandoned chapel appeared shortly afterward, a lonely stone structure standing at the edge of a forgotten cemetery, half hidden by fog, half consumed by time. The Duke dismounted first. The silence immediately felt wrong. No birds, no wind, nothing, only stillness. His instincts sharpened. Years of military campaigns had taught him something important. Silence often arrived before violence. He slowly approached the chapel entrance. The wooden door hung partially open. Inside was darkness, and no sign of anyone waiting. The Duke's hand moved instinctively toward the pistol beneath his coat. Something was wrong, very wrong. Then he heard it, a sound, tiny, almost invisible, a shifting footstep behind him. The Duke spun instantly. Too late. A gunshot exploded through the fog. The world erupted. One of his riders screamed. His horse reared violently. Chaos exploded across the cemetery. Men appeared from everywhere, from behind gravestones, from the fog, from hidden positions surrounding the chapel. At least 8, maybe 10, armed, prepared, waiting. It was an ambush. The Duke moved immediately. No hesitation, no panic. Years of warfare took over. Another shot cracked through the air. Stone shattered beside him. He fired his pistol. One attacker collapsed. The others advanced. The fog turned the battlefield into a nightmare. Shapes appearing and disappearing. Gunfire, shouting, steel. The Duke drew his sword. An attacker rushed forward. The Duke sidestepped. One movement, one strike. The man fell. Another came immediately, then another. The Duke fought with brutal efficiency. Not elegance, survival. Yet despite his skill, the situation was worsening. The attackers had numbers, positioning, preparation. This was no robbery, no random attack. Someone had paid for this, someone powerful, someone desperate. Blackthorn. The realization hit him instantly. The Earl had decided to remove the problem permanently. At Ashcombe Manor, Eleanor could no longer remain still. Something was wrong. She knew it. Every passing minute deepened the feeling. Finally she turned toward Thomas. "Saddle my horse, my lady, now." The valet hesitated. The Duke instructed. I don't care what he instructed. Her voice was firm. "He is in danger." Thomas stared, then slowly nodded, because somehow he believed her. Back at the chapel, the battle continued. The Duke's riders fought fiercely, but they were being overwhelmed. One attacker fell. Then another, yet more, emerged from the fog. The Duke blocked a sword strike, countered, drove the man backward. Then suddenly pain, white-hot pain. His shoulder exploded with force, a bullet. The impact nearly knocked him off balance. The Duke staggered. Blood spread across his coat. The attackers saw it immediately and pressed forward. The leader stepped from the fog, tall, broad-shouldered, face hidden beneath a dark scarf. He pointed toward the wounded Duke. "Finish it." The command echoed through the cemetery. Several men advanced. The Duke tightened his grip on his sword. Blood dripped onto the stones. His shoulder burned. His vision blurred slightly. Yet he remained standing, refusing to fall, refusing to surrender. Because men like Marcus Aurelius had taught a lesson he never forgot. You do not control what happens. You control how you respond. And the Duke intended to respond with steel. Then something unexpected happened. The distant sound of galloping horses shattered the tension. Every head turned. The attackers looked toward the road. Confusion spread instantly. More riders. Approaching fast, very fast, the leader cursed, because these were not his men. They were Ashcombe riders, and at their head a woman, Eleanor. The Duke's heart nearly stopped. She rode through the fog like a force of nature. Determined, fearless, completely reckless, exactly as he should have expected. The attackers hesitated. That hesitation changed everything. The Duke seized the opportunity. One strike, another. The balance shifted immediately. Panic spread through the attackers. The carefully planned assassination was collapsing. And the mysterious leader realized it. Retreat? The command came too late. Several attackers fled. Others were captured. A few disappeared into the fog forever. But the leader escaped, vanishing before anyone could identify him, leaving only chaos behind, and questions. Far too many questions. Minutes later, Eleanor reached the Duke. The moment she saw blood on his coat, her face lost all colour. Damien. It was the first time she had spoken his given name. The Duke looked up. Despite everything, he smiled faintly. "I told you to stay at Ashcombe." Her eyes filled with tears. "You were nearly killed, I noticed." She knelt beside him, hands trembling, relief and terror colliding inside her. For several seconds, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to disappear. Only the two of them remained. Then the Duke gently reached for her hand, and for the first time since they met, he didn't let go. But neither of them noticed that one of the captured attackers was watching carefully, because hidden inside his coat was a letter carrying Blackthorn's seal. Proof of the Earl's involvement, proof that could destroy him. And before sunset, that letter would reveal something even more shocking. A truth neither Eleanor nor the Duke could possibly imagine. A truth connecting Blackthorn to Lord Harcourt's final night alive. The journey back to Ashcombe Manor was slow, not because the distance was great, because the Duke was wounded. The bullet had passed through his shoulder without striking bone, but blood loss and exhaustion had weakened him. Even so, he refused to ride in a carriage, refused assistance, refused rest. Infuriatingly typical. The man had nearly died only hours earlier, yet somehow still behaved as though he were indestructible. By the time they reached Ashcombe, dusk had settled across the countryside. Lanterns flickered throughout the manor. Servants rushed forward as soon as they arrived. Doctors were summoned, bandages prepared, rooms readied, and through all of it, Eleanor remained beside him, never leaving, not once. An hour later, the Duke sat in his study while the physician finished dressing the wound. "You were fortunate." The doctor secured the final bandage. Another inch and the outcome might have been very different. The Duke nodded. "I am aware." The physician looked unconvinced. As are all reckless men who survive. Eleanor almost smiled. The Duke merely sighed. Eventually the physician departed. The moment the door closed, silence settled over the room. Neither spoke immediately, because both were thinking the same thing. Someone had tried to murder him. Not intimidate, not threaten, murder. The line had finally been crossed. A knock interrupted their thoughts. "Enter." The door opened. Captain Hayes stepped inside. One of the estate guards. His expression was serious. "My lord." The Duke straightened. "What is it?" We searched the captured attacker's belongings. Instantly the room sharpened. And Hayes placed a folded letter on the desk. We found this. The Duke's eyes narrowed. The seal remained intact. Black wax, elegant design, a noble crest. Eleanor recognized it immediately. Her breath caught. Blackthorn. The Earl's seal. For several moments nobody moved. The evidence sat before them like a loaded weapon. Finally the Duke broke the seal, opened the letter, read. And as he read, something changed in his face. Not shock, not surprise, something worse. Recognition. Eleanor's heart raced. What does it say? The Duke looked up slowly, then handed her the paper. She began reading. The message was brief, cold, professional, fashion, payment, agreement, instructions. A sentence that froze her blood. The Duke must not discover what happened at Raven's Crossing 13 years ago. The room became utterly silent. Raven's Crossing, 13 years ago, the exact year Lord Harcourt disappeared. Eleanor lowered the letter. Her hands trembled. The Duke looked equally disturbed, because both of them understood. The attack was not simply about the stolen will. It was about something older, something hidden, something connected directly to her husband's disappearance. Hours later, they sat in the library. Maps covered the table. Documents lay scattered everywhere, and at the centre sat the letter. The Duke stared at it, thinking, analysing, connecting pieces. Then suddenly he stood. Eleanor, she looked up. I know that name. What name? Raven's Crossing. Hope surged inside her. You've heard of it? The Duke nodded. It isn't a village. It isn't, no. He crossed toward a bookshelf, pulled out an old military map, unrolled it, then pointed. There, Eleanor leaned closer. The location sat beside a river several miles north of Blackthorn Manor, a narrow crossing point, old, remote. What happened there? The Duke's expression darkened. Years ago, a carriage disappeared. Silence. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. A carriage. Officially, it was called an accident. His voice lowered. The river flooded. She already knew where this was going. The Duke continued. The passengers were never found. A chill spread through her. Who were they? The answer arrived like a knife. A government investigator. Eleanor froze. The same investigator. The man whose name appeared in the ledgers. The man who uncovered the fraud. The man who vanished. The Duke nodded grimly. He was travelling to London to expose Blackthorn. Most likely. The room felt colder, much colder, because suddenly the pattern became terrifyingly clear. The investigator vanished. Lord Harcourt discovered the truth. Lord Harcourt vanished. Now the Duke discovered the truth, and someone tried to kill him. One by one. Anyone who got close. Anyone who learned too much. Anyone who threatened Blackthorn. The following morning brought another revelation. One even more shocking. A messenger arrived from London. Exhausted, mud-covered, urgent. He carried documents requested by the Duke weeks earlier. Records hidden within government archives. Records concerning the investigator. The Duke opened them immediately. Read. Then stopped. Completely stopped. Eleanor noticed instantly. What is it? The Duke did not answer, not immediately. Instead, he handed her a page. She looked down, read the name, and felt the room spin. Because the investigator had left behind family, a wife, a son, and the son's name was one she recognized, one she knew very well. Captain Hayes, the captain standing guard at Ashcombe Manor. The same man who found the letter, the same man helping them, the same man whose father vanished at Raven's Crossing. My God! The Duke nodded slowly. He never knew. Eleanor stared at the page. Years of lies. Years of buried truths, years of stolen justice, and now the victims were beginning to connect, one thread at a time. That evening, Captain Hayes was summoned. The revelation devastated him. For several minutes, he could barely speak. My father, his voice cracked. He wasn't killed in an accident, the Duke answered honestly. I don't believe so. Hayes lowered his head. Years of grief filled his eyes, years spent believing a lie. Then something changed. Pain became determination. If Blackthorn did this, his fist tightened. We finish it. The Duke nodded, yes. But Eleanor noticed something else, something everyone had missed. One final note attached to the investigator's records, a handwritten note, barely noticeable, hidden among hundreds of pages. She picked it up, read it once, then again. Her heart stopped. Because it contained a location, not Raven's Crossing, another location, a place the investigator intended to search before his disappearance, a place connected directly to Lord Harcourt, a place no one had considered, Blackthorn Abbey, an abandoned monastery on Blackthorn land. The final line read, evidence concealed beneath the crypt. If anything happens to me, search there. The room fell silent. The Duke looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at the Duke, both thinking the same thing. The journal, the missing evidence, the truth. It might all be there, hidden beneath Blackthorn Abbey, waiting for someone brave enough to find it. But neither of them knew that at that very moment, inside Blackthorn Manor, the Earl was packing, burning documents, destroying records, preparing to flee England forever. Because he had just received news of the failed assassination, and for the first time in 13 years, the Earl of Blackthorn was afraid, very afraid, because the past he buried in blood was beginning to rise from the grave. The first snow of winter arrived 3 days before Christmas. A delicate white blanket covered the hills surrounding Ashmore Hall, softening the scars left by months of conflict. For the first time in nearly a year, the estate felt peaceful. The tenants were secure, the harvest had been sold, the legal battles were finished, and the will that had nearly destroyed Eleanor's life had finally fulfilled its purpose. Yet peace brought its own challenges, because now there were no enemies left to fight, no urgent crises, no hidden conspiracies, no distractions, only the truth that neither Eleanor nor Sebastian could avoid any longer. The future, and whether that future included both of them. Eleanor stood beside the library window, watching snowflakes drift through the morning air. The estate felt strangely quiet. Almost too quiet. For months she had lived with uncertainty. Now certainty frightened her more. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." The door opened. It was Sebastian. The sight of him still affected her far more than she wished to admit. He looked tired, not physically, emotionally, as though he carried a decision he had not yet spoken aloud. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." For a moment neither moved, neither spoke. The silence between them was becoming unbearable. Finally Sebastian stepped forward. "There is something I must tell you." Eleanor's heart tightened. "Very well." His gaze remained fixed upon her. "The Crown has offered me a position in London." The words landed like ice. London, far away, far from Ashmore, far from her. "I see. The appointment is significant. Congratulations." He smiled sadly. "That is not the reaction I expected." "What reaction should I give?" His jaw tightened. Any reaction other than pretending it does not matter. The truth threatened to escape, but Eleanor forced herself to remain composed. "It is an excellent opportunity." "Yes, and you should accept it." "Should I?" She looked away, because she could not trust herself to look directly at him. Not when every part of her wanted to ask him to stay. Sebastian watched her carefully. He knew exactly what she was doing. Protecting herself, the same way she always had, the same way he once had. But neither of them could hide forever. Not anymore. "Eleanor." She remained silent. "I have spent months fighting for this estate." "Yes, I have spent months protecting your future, I know. And yet the only thing I truly care about leaving behind is you." Her breath caught. The room suddenly felt much smaller, much warmer, much more dangerous. "Sebastian." "No." He stepped closer. "This time you will listen." The intensity in his voice froze her in place. "I am tired of pretending." His eyes never left hers. "Tired of speaking around the truth. Sebastian, I love you." The words shattered every defense she possessed. Silence filled the room. Snow continued falling beyond the windows, but inside Ashmore Hall, the world seemed to stop. "I love you," he repeated quietly. "Not because of the estate, not because of the will, not because fate forced us together." His voice softened. "I love your strength, your courage, your stubbornness." A faint smile touched his lips. "Especially your stubbornness." Despite herself, Eleanor laughed through gathering tears, and that small laugh nearly destroyed the last of his restraint. "I love the woman who refused to surrender when everyone expected her to." His expression became vulnerable, terrifyingly vulnerable. "And I cannot imagine a future without her." For several seconds Eleanor could not speak. The confession felt impossible, beautiful, terrifying, everything she had secretly wanted, everything she had feared. Because loving Sebastian meant risking her heart completely, and she had already lost too much. But perhaps that was the lesson she had spent a year learning. Love was not safety. Love was courage, the courage to trust, to hope, to risk. Slowly she crossed the room. Sebastian watched every step. His pulse thundered. Eleanor stopped directly before him, close enough to hear his heartbeat, close enough to see the uncertainty hidden beneath his confidence. And for the first time, she realized something extraordinary. The Duke was afraid, not of enemies, not of scandal, not of failure, of her answer. A smile touched her lips. Good. He deserved at least a few moments of suffering. "You took long enough." Confusion flashed across his face. "What?" She laughed softly. "To tell me." Realization struck him. Hope followed, then disbelief. "Eleanor, you truly are hopeless sometimes." His eyes widened. "You mean I love you too?" The words escaped before fear could stop them, and suddenly everything changed. The distance vanished. The uncertainty vanished. The months of restraint vanished. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, and Eleanor did not resist. For the first time since her husband's death, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel completely safe. Outside, winter settled over Ashmore, but inside the library, something entirely different began. A future, not built upon obligation, not built upon inheritance, not built upon legal documents, but built upon choice and love, the very thing both of them had spent so long denying. Yet even as happiness finally arrived, neither realized that one final revelation remained hidden, a revelation buried within the original will, a final secret left behind by Lord Ashmore himself. One that would change everything they believed about the past, and perhaps everything about the future as well. Christmas Eve arrived beneath a sky of silver clouds. Ashmore Hall glowed with warmth. Candles flickered in every window. Evergreen garlands draped the grand staircase. Laughter echoed through corridors that had once been filled with uncertainty. For the first time in many years, the estate felt alive, and Eleanor felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace, not perfect peace, not the fragile peace that depends upon circumstances, but the deeper kind, the peace that comes from finally knowing where one belongs. She belonged here, at Ashmore, with the people she loved, and with Sebastian. The thought alone brought a smile to her face. That evening the tenants gathered in the great hall for the annual Christmas celebration. Children raced between tables. Musicians played near the hearth. The scent of roasted meats and spiced wine filled the air. Sebastian stood beside Eleanor as they welcomed guests. Watching him laugh with farmers and stable boys, she was reminded once again why she loved him. Not because he was a duke, not because he was powerful, but because he treated every person as though they mattered, a quality increasingly rare among the aristocracy. "You are staring at me." His voice pulled her from her thoughts. She smiled. "Perhaps." His eyes sparkled. "And what conclusion have you reached? That you remain entirely too pleased with yourself." "I have reasons to be pleased." He lowered his voice. "The woman I love finally stopped pretending she does not love me." Eleanor nearly laughed aloud. "Careful, Your Grace." "Why?" "People may discover you possess a sense of humour, a terrible scandal." She shook her head. But before she could reply, a servant approached. "Your Grace." "My lady." The young man looked nervous. "There is someone asking to see you." Sebastian frowned. "At this hour?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Who is it?" The servant swallowed. "A solicitor from London." Within minutes they were seated in Lord Ashmore's former study. The elderly solicitor removed snow from his coat before taking a seat. "My apologies for the intrusion. You travelled from London on Christmas Eve?" Eleanor asked. "I am afraid the matter could not wait." The solicitor placed a leather case upon the desk. Sebastian exchanged a glance with Eleanor. Neither liked the sound of that. The solicitor opened the case, rested a sealed packet, old, yellowed, clearly untouched for years. Eleanor immediately recognized the handwriting. Her late husband's. Her heart skipped. "What is this?" The solicitor hesitated. "It is a document entrusted to my firm 15 years ago." 15 years? Yes. Sebastian leaned forward. "And why bring it now?" "Because the instructions attached to it were very specific." The solicitor carefully unfolded another paper. "To be delivered only if Lady Eleanor Ashmore successfully retains ownership of Ashmore Estate." Silence filled the room. Eleanor stared at the packet. Her husband had prepared this 15 years earlier, long before his death, long before the will, long before any of the chaos. Her hands trembled slightly. "What does it contain?" The solicitor shook his head. "I do not know." "Then why now?" "Because those were his instructions." He gently slid the packet across the desk, and because he believed the contents would only matter if you succeeded. After the solicitor departed, neither Eleanor nor Sebastian immediately opened it. The packet sat between them, silent, waiting, almost as though it possessed a life of its own. Finally Sebastian spoke. "You do not have to read it tonight." Eleanor stared at the seal. "Yes, you could wait." "I know." But she already knew she wouldn't. Slowly she reached for the letter opener. The seal broke, the paper unfolded, and the moment her eyes found the first line, her breath caught. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then you have done exactly what I always believed you would. You survived." Tears instantly blurred her vision, because she recognized his voice. Not the sick man from his final years, but the man she had once loved, the man she had married. She continued reading. "When I inherited Ashmore, I believed strength meant control. I thought leadership meant power. I spent years trying to protect everything I owned. And in doing so, I nearly destroyed the things that mattered most, you." Eleanor's hands shook. Sebastian remained silent beside her, giving her space, giving her support. The letter continued. "If I have learned anything, it is that land is temporary, titles are temporary, even life itself is temporary, but character endures, and yours has always surpassed my own. You never understood how extraordinary you were, perhaps because true strength rarely recognizes itself." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away, then continued. "There is something I never told you, the real reason I created the will. Not the reason everyone believed, the real reason." Eleanor froze. Sebastian straightened slightly, both suddenly alert. The next paragraph changed everything. "Years ago I discovered evidence that a branch of my family intended to seize Ashmore after my death, not because they loved the estate, but because they intended to divide it, sell it, and strip it of every resource possible. They saw only profit, never responsibility, never legacy. I knew that if Ashmore fell into their hands, generations of work would be destroyed within a few years. So I created a test, not for them, for you." Eleanor's eyes widened. "A test?" The letter continued. "I knew they would challenge the will. I knew they would attack. I knew they would underestimate you. And that was exactly what I wanted. Because I trusted you more than I trusted any of them." A stunned silence filled the study. The entire will, the entire battle, everything had been intentional. Eleanor continued reading. "If you succeeded, it would prove what I already knew. That Ashmore belonged to the strongest guardian it had ever known. Not because of birth, not because of title, but because of character. And if you failed, then perhaps I had been wrong. But I never believed I was." A small laugh escaped through her tears. Even in death, her husband had remained stubborn. Yet somehow she found comfort in it. The final page waited. She turned it carefully and discovered one final revelation. "There is one more thing. If you have found happiness again, do not reject it out of loyalty to my memory. Live, laugh, begin again. No grave should hold the living hostage. No memory should become a prison. If another man has earned your trust, then choose life, choose happiness, choose him. Because that is what I would wish for you, always." The room fell silent, completely silent. Eleanor lowered the letter, unable to speak, unable to move. For a long time, neither she nor Sebastian said anything. The crackling fireplace became the only sound. Finally, Sebastian broke the silence. "What are you thinking?" She looked at him and smiled through tears. "I'm thinking my husband knew me better than I realized." Then she handed him the final page. Sebastian read it slowly, carefully, and when he finished, emotion filled his expression. For a man who rarely showed vulnerability, the sight nearly broke her heart. "He was a remarkable man," Sebastian said quietly. "Yes, he loved you." "Yes." Sebastian folded the letter. "And somehow he still managed to frighten me from beyond the grave." Eleanor laughed, a real laugh, the kind she had not experienced in years. And for the first time, the past no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a blessing, a chapter completed, not forgotten, completed. Later that night, after the celebration ended and the estate settled into silence, Eleanor stood beside the window, overlooking the snow-covered grounds. Sebastian joined her. Neither spoke immediately. There was no need. The future stretched before them, bright, uncertain, beautiful. At last, Eleanor turned toward him. "What happens now?" Sebastian smiled. "Now?" "Yes." His eyes softened. "Now we stop surviving," the answer surprised her. "And then," he gently took her hand, "then we begin living." Outside, snow continued falling across Ashmore. But inside the hall, beneath candlelight and hope, a new story was finally beginning. One no will could dictate, one no enemy could steal, one written not by inheritance, but by love. Spring arrived gently at Ashmore Hall. The snow melted from the hills. The frozen streams awakened once more. Fields that had slept beneath winter's blanket turned green again. And with every passing day, life returned, not only to the estate, but to Eleanor. For years she had lived beneath the weight of grief, then beneath the burden of uncertainty, then beneath the pressure of survival. Now, for the first time in a very long while, she woke each morning without fear, without dread, without wondering what disaster might arrive next. Peace had finally come, and peace, she discovered, was a beautiful thing. One morning, Eleanor walked through the village with Sebastian beside her. The people greeted them warmly. Children waved. Shopkeepers smiled. Farmers tipped their hats. Months earlier, many of these same people had worried whether Ashmore would survive. Now the estate was stronger than ever. New homes were being built. The schoolhouse had been expanded. The village mill had been repaired. And employment had increased throughout the region. Everywhere Eleanor looked, she saw evidence of what perseverance had achieved. Not her perseverance alone, theirs, the entire community's. Ashmore had endured because its people had refused to surrender. Sebastian glanced at her. "You are smiling, am I? You have been smiling for nearly 10 minutes. She laughed. "Perhaps I am happy." That would explain it. They reached the village square. A group of children rushed toward them immediately. One small girl grabbed Eleanor's hand. "My lady." "Good morning, Clara." The child beamed. "Will you be coming to the festival?" "Of course. Everyone says it will be the biggest festival ever." Sebastian leaned closer. "I believe that is because someone spent an unreasonable amount of money organizing it." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Are you complaining?" "Not at all. You approved every expense. I was manipulated." "By whom?" His gaze softened. "You." The children giggled. Even they understood the answer. As they continued walking, Eleanor found herself thinking about the letter, the final letter from her late husband. Months had passed since Christmas, yet its words remained with her. Not because they haunted her, because they freed her. For years she had unconsciously carried guilt. Guilt for surviving, guilt for moving forward, guilt for imagining a future beyond loss. The letter had shattered that guilt completely. It had given her permission she never truly needed, permission to live, and now she intended to honor that gift. That afternoon, preparations for the spring festival filled the estate. Workers decorated the gardens. Musicians arrived from neighboring towns. Guests began filling the guest wing. Even members of London's high society travelled to Ashmore. Word had spread, not about scandal, not about legal battles, about success, about transformation, about a widow who refused to lose everything, and a duke who stood beside her when it mattered most. Their story had become something larger than either expected, a symbol, a reminder that courage could overcome greed, that loyalty could defeat ambition, and that love could emerge from even the darkest circumstances. As evening approached, Eleanor stood in front of a mirror while her maid adjusted the final details of her gown. The soft ivory silk reflected candlelight beautifully. "You look radiant, my lady." Eleanor smiled. "Thank you." The maid hesitated. "There is something else." "What is it?" The young woman grinned. "The Duke has spent the entire day looking nervous." Eleanor laughed. Sebastian nervous, terrified. Now Eleanor was intrigued. "What has frightened him?" "I couldn't possibly say." The maid's smile widened. "But I suspect you shall discover soon enough." The festival began beneath a sky painted gold by the setting sun. Music drifted through the gardens. Lanterns illuminated pathways. Guests danced across the lawn. Laughter filled the evening air. It was exactly the kind of celebration Ashmore deserved. A celebration of survival, of renewal, of hope. Eleanor moved through the crowd greeting guests, yet she noticed something unusual. Sebastian seemed distracted, restless, watching her whenever he thought she wasn't looking. Finally she approached him. "Is something wrong?" "No, you are behaving strangely." "I am very," he sighed. "Perhaps." His expression became serious. "There is something I wish to show you." He led her away from the festival, away from the music, away from the crowd, toward the Western Gardens, the place where they had shared countless conversations over the past year, the place where friendship had become trust, and trust had become love. The sun had nearly disappeared by the time they arrived. Golden light stretched across the fields. Everything felt still, almost sacred. Sebastian stopped beside an ancient oak tree, then turned toward her. For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt different, significant, and suddenly Eleanor understood why he had been nervous all day. "Sebastian," he smiled weakly. "I had a speech prepared." "Did you?" "It was excellent." "I'm sure it was. I have forgotten every word." She laughed softly. That seemed to make him relax, a little. Then he reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. Eleanor's breath caught. "I spent months helping you save Ashmore." His voice was steady now. "I spent months believing that was enough." He looked directly into her eyes. It wasn't. The box opened. Inside rested a beautiful ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. "I do not want merely to stand beside your future." His voice softened. "I want to be part of it." Tears immediately filled Eleanor's eyes, not from sadness, from joy so overwhelming she could barely breathe. "I cannot promise a life without hardship." He smiled. "Given our history, that would be a foolish promise." She laughed through tears. "But I can promise loyalty, partnership, respect, and love." He took a slow breath, then lowered himself onto one knee. "Eleanor Ashmore." Her heart nearly stopped. "Will you marry me?" For one beautiful moment the world disappeared. No estate, no title, no inheritance, no expectations. Only two people, two hearts, two lives forever changed. And there was only one answer she could give. Yes, the word escaped as a whisper. Then again, stronger, yes. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. Relief washed across his face, pure relief, pure happiness, the kind that cannot be hidden. He rose to his feet, slipped the ring onto her finger, and kissed her beneath the fading light of sunset. Behind them, applause suddenly erupted. Both turned in surprise. The entire festival had followed them. Villagers, guests, servants, friends, everyone. Apparently no one had intended to miss the proposal. Eleanor covered her face. "They were spying on us." Sebastian nodded, without shame. The crowd cheered louder. Children jumped excitedly. Even the oldest villagers wiped tears from their eyes, because they all understood what this moment meant. Not merely a marriage, a victory, the final victory, the completion of a journey that had begun with a widow standing alone against impossible odds. Later that night, after the celebration finally ended, Eleanor stood on the terrace overlooking the estate. The moon illuminated the fields. The village lights glowed softly in the distance. Everything felt peaceful, complete. Sebastian joined her, future husband. The thought still felt wonderfully unreal. Together they looked across the land they had fought so hard to protect. "You know," Sebastian said quietly, "your husband was right." Eleanor smiled. "About what?" "About Ashmore." She looked toward the estate, the home she nearly lost, the home she had saved, the home that had ultimately saved her, and suddenly she understood. Ashmore had never truly been about land, or wealth, or inheritance. It had always been about people, family, legacy, love, the things worth protecting, the things worth fighting for, the things worth living for. Eleanor rested her head against Sebastian's shoulder, and together they watched the future unfold before them. A future built not on fear, but on hope, not on obligation, but on choice, not on loss, but on love. And as spring blossomed across Ashmore Hall, a new chapter began, one filled with laughter, with family, with purpose, and with a happiness neither had believed possible. The widow, who was about to lose everything, had gained far more than she ever imagined. A home, a future, and a love strong enough to endure every storm.